I'd like to call the meeting to order and do roll call.
Commissioner Craig, can you use your microphone? Yes, here. Okay. Commissioner Lucero. Commissioner
Lucero.
Peterson. Sorry.
Here.
Commissioner Reseg. Okay. Commissioner Sanchez.
Present.
Commissioner Stagg.
Here.
Okay. Chair Terlesky.
Here. Okay, Pledge of Allegiance.
And
Please
I
join
just
me.
wanted to
Yes.
notate, Commissioner Lucero had called in. She's excused.
Yes.
I'm on video call.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First off, we have the approval of minutes for March 25th, 2025, discussion and possible action.
I move that we approve the minutes of the March 25th meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Call to the public, comments from the public. Those wishing to address the commission should fill out a request form in advance. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda with the exception of those on the consent agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. The commission may not respond to speaker during the call to the public. The commission may direct staff to study the matter and request that the matter be placed on a future agenda. Do we have anyone signed up to speak? Thanks, Joyce. Number 3, action items. A, renaming Route 66 in Kingman. There has been an interest from the community to rename Andy Devine Avenue to Route 66 to commemorate the upcoming Route 66 centennial in 2026. Wayfinding on the historic highway should be a priority to assist visitors and for locals to increase community pride in Route 66. Discussion and possible action.
So, Chair Treleski, this is here for discussion. Our team did find the video where it was bestowed Andy Devine's name onto Front Street, what Route 66 was called back then, if the commission would like to see it.
I think that'd be interesting.
Is that sharing? Okay.
Josh, do you have a little background about the naming of Andy Devine and how long it's been named Andy Devine?
So that was in 1955 on This Is Your Life. And prior to that was called Front Street. Andy Devine, the road on this side of the tracks was Front Street. Topeka was South Front Street. And it's been named Andy Devine ever since. We do have people coming in and don't know where Route 66 is. They ask at the visitor center, how do we get on Route 66, not realizing it's the same street.
I think it's interesting that, this is something that has happened long enough ago that it's significant that it was renamed to Andy Devine Avenue. But I think just like with any number of things, our relationship to events in the past have changed. And the purpose now of naming it Route 66 is fairly logistical in a lot of ways, but it sounds like it's never actually been acknowledged as Route 66. And so the timing is appropriate with the centennial coming up to acknowledge that part of its history specifically.
Well, I find Andy Devine to be a real nugget of our history downtown. And we have Andy Devine Days, Andy Devine Parade. I would rather see something like to change maybe the beginning of Andy Devine could be changed to Route 66. But then when you got down as far as the exit to Beale Street, this strip downtown could be known as Andy Devine Avenue. I think it's worth preserving.
Would think instead of spending all the money to change the name of the street for all the businesses and people,
Right.
that it would be far easier just to, as we already have, put up all kinds of signs that says this is Route 66 and not change. I'm not for the change.
There is current signage that says Route 66. I work in the visitor center as well. And many people ask, how do I get on Route 66? And I have to explain to them that they were just driving on Route 66. That's how they got here. We also, we have a Andy Award, the association does, that we were awarded, and we have a little information about Andy next to it. The number of people that know who Andy Devine was and his connection to Kingman is fewer and fewer. And I think with the centennial, we do want to honor Route 66 and our connection to it in our community. I wouldn't be opposed to finding maybe a different street we could call Andy Devine, but I think we are taking away from Route 66 by continuing to call it Andy Devine.
I agree with the premise that fewer and fewer people have a clue who Andy Devine is. And so
If you can all speak into the microphones, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fewer and fewer people have a clue who Andy Devine is. And so I don't think we should ignore Andy Devine, but I am a little concerned about what my fellow commissioner mentioned, and that is spending money on the signs, and all of the vendors on Andy Devine have to change their address. And that's something that we need to deal with.
So I guess that's one of the biggest things then that we'd want to assess is what costs would be involved in this? Is there a way to, that's going to be a lot of it. Because I would also argue that when we talk about, from the historical side of it, saying that, people don't know who Andy Devine is, and that's true and that's significant, but I also think that maybe the relationship of the Devine family to what people understand has changed. We've got things going on with the Beale Hotel. It's not just about Andy right now, it's about the family and the hotel, and so there are other significant things that are going on. So if we could find a more cost-effective, if we could find out that this was cost-effective and something that was feasible, is this something that people would the commission be interested in pursuing it?
Is there a way to make it, to change the name temporarily?
That seems more expensive than just changing it altogether, doing it twice.
And if, I know there's other commissioners looking at this, there's members of the community that have come up with this request, including businesses on Route 66. If it is something that the city does decide to pursue, then they'll be looking at, we'll be having someone come in from planning to describe the process of all the things that need to happen and how long that process takes. And so I think the Chair Terlesky is correct that renaming it temporarily would be more cumbersome than just renaming it the one time.
How about the possibility of renaming only the part from Stockton Hill to where it joins Beale Street? So that we don't have to deal with what's beyond that, because the part of Route 66 that we're really talking about is that part that runs from Stockton Hill to Beale Street.
Well, I guess I,
don't like the idea of abandoning our history and putting it on the back shelf. I think there's other ways to tell people you're on Route 66 besides changing the whole name of the street. You're right, Andy Devine's not a big deal to us, but it's still part of our history. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Wild Bill Cody. I don't want them to go away either.
Right.
Again, I'm not for changing the name.
I think 70 years says something. I mean, that is history. It's been part of, the city of Kingman for 70 years. So even if people don't know why it's named that, it's still a part of our history, our community. And as far as Route 66 is a long road, and there are lots of Route 66 along the way. So I think we should stay with Andy Devine.
I did attend a national meeting for the Route 66 National Commission, and this was one of the big topics at the meeting was wayfinding, and that visitors are finding it difficult to know when they are on Route 66. And I know that we will be expecting a large influx of visitors. And I do want it to be a sense of pride. I know that if our address was on Route 66, I would really like that.
Can we put up a banner that says, welcome to Route 66, as it comes down the hill to downtown Kingman, or, during that year?
I would argue, though, that the same argument you're making about turning your back on Andy Devine, in a sense, you're turning your back on Route 66 history by the same argument. So it's a matter of deciding if this is the best way to acknowledge that. Because, again, I argue that, at the museum, we're reviewing our exhibit of Andy Devine, because what we find is that people's relationship to that part of the past has to be reexamined. You can't assume that they know and they'll figure it out. And so we're redoing exhibits to fit that. But we're finding that the history of the Devine family, just like the history of the Benelli family, things like that, they're interwoven in other ways, and they're personal to us. And so the things that are being done for the Beale Hotel, and there are things that are being done in other spots to acknowledge that part of our history. It's not turning your back on it. I would argue that it's finding a way of interpreting it to fit the needs of, the public that you have now, and acknowledging Route 66 as the name of the road. If that's being done all along the way, that's continuity of national history, and that's us being able to be a part of that in a new way. And so I would argue that it makes sense to change it.
So it was, before it was Andy Devine, it was what?
So locally, it was called Front Street because it fronted along the railroad tracks, but it was part of US Highway 66.
But it was, and they had the signs that said US Route 66. Yeah, it would have had the highway signs.
Correct.
The highway sign shields. Okay, so it has never been Route 66. It was always had a different name. How far beyond Stockton Hill Road was it called Front Street?
I'd have to go back and see if we've got any records of that. My thought would be that where it comes up and meets Beale Street now is somewhere probably around where that would have ended, but I don't know for sure.
So when you say when it meets Beale Street,
Past 10th Street.
okay, at 10th Street. So it hasn't really been Andy Devine or Front Street for all that long. The most of the road has been Route 66 for far more than it has been Front Street or Andy Devine.
Right. On the other side of Hilltop, it would not have been called Front Street. It would have been US Highway 66. I just don't know at what point
Sure,
the Front
I
Street name
understand.
would have dropped. And that may have just been a colloquialism. A lot of the streets were kind of known by locals as what they were, but there wasn't a formal naming system to a lot of the streets in Kingman at that time.
So actually, it would have been Route 66 for like 30 years, Front Street and Route 66 for 30 years, if this is Route 6600th birthday. And then 70 years, it's been Andy Devine. Is that logical?
It's speculation, correct? I don't know at what point it would have been called Front Street, sometime probably in the 1880s or 90s. And it would have been National Old Trails Highway before it was Highway 66. And of course, those alignments always changed because National Old Trails Highway would have went down 4th Street, through the canyon. It would have went a different way, even going up towards Hilltop. You've got different little streets up there that are part of the original stretches of Highway 66 and National Trails Highway. So things over time have evolved and they're different now than they were when those names were used.
Would it be feasible, rather than changing the name, to simply putting signs? Don't we have, I mean, the road is not officially Route 66, but it seems to me when you go out Route 66 and you're going east, don't you encounter the old-fashioned signs that say with the U.S. shield and it says historic Route 66?
There are the historic Route 66 signages. I think what Chair Treleski was talking about at the Route 66 Summit, where people that were using Apple Maps, Google Maps, different mapping services aren't going to tell you when you're on Route 66 because they're not going to acknowledge that that's Route 66. It's going to acknowledge it's Andy Devine. So you can put the signage up, but that may not help someone with planning their journey before they come into town and knowing where they're going to go.
Okay.
How long does it take to get that done in time for it to be on the Apple Maps and everything for the 100th anniversary? It probably wouldn't be completed in that time anyhow, would it?
I'm not aware what timing, how long that process takes, and that's something I said we'd have someone from planning come in and discuss because it's all of your emergency services, all of the, online mapping, U.S. Geological,
Sure.
all of that information would have to be updated, and I don't know how long that process takes.
Yeah.
Since the object of this is to get the Google and Apple Maps, wouldn't it be important to actually know whether that will get done? Because the object of all of this is to get it done by next year, and we're almost halfway through this year.
That's a valid question. So I think this is just to come and get discussion and see if there'd be an interest. This obviously doesn't kick off making that process happen, but if there is, then we can go back to planning, and we can see if someone can come in and discuss what that process looks like and go over the different options.
I make a motion at this time that we do not change the name of Andy Devine to Route 66.
Can I motion?
It needs a second for discussion or
okay.
voting.
Is there a second? All in favor of not renaming Andy Devine Route 66, please signify with aye. All in favor of not renaming Andy Devine Route 66, please signify by aye. That you seconded that, her motion. Could you repeat your motion, please?
Yes, I move that we do not rename Andy Devine as Route 66.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
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 Did you get the Zoom as well, Joyce?
Yes, and I am not in favor.
Okay. She voted, okay. So the motion, that does not carry, correct, Josh?
Right.
So could there be a new motion,
To do what?
a different motion?
Yes, I believe you can still make other motions until you decide to close this item.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we move forward with investigating changing the name of Andy Devine to Route 66.
I'll second. All in favor, please signify by aye.
If
Aye.
I could ask a question first?
Yes.
This is just,
Aye.
just to move ahead with talking about it. This is not to do it. This is to move ahead, get information, more information. Is that right, Leah?
Yes. I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can,
Joyce, do you want to read back Leah's motion?
Well, it may, sorry, I don't have it entirely, but Commissioner West Stagview did mention that you'd like to move forward on getting more information. Just getting more information.
Right.
Technically, having already defeated a motion to not move forward, can we create a new motion to move forward? That
That's-
seems contradictory.
So the first motion was to not move forward with renaming. The new motion is to move forward. The first motion was defeated.
And this is to get more
It
information.
seems to me that the issue then becomes settled.
No.
we could
Not.
just drop the issue, though.
Okay, all right. Okay,
If it's to gather information, I'll second it.
If the first motion passed, you can entertain a new motion.
Do you want to clarify your motion?
I guess
You should.
probably should clarify it to me,
Yeah.
actually. I'll make a motion that we move forward with renaming Andy Devine Route 66.
No.
Okay.
And I second that. Okay. All in favor of, Joyce, could you repeat the motion?
That Stag to move forward renaming Andy Devine Avenue to Route 66.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Okay, any opposed?
Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay.
Four. Okay, next we have reports. The 2025 Preserve AZ Conference. Summary of the 2025 Preserve Arizona Conference in Phoenix, May 14th to the 17th, 2025, which was geared to professionals in the field of historic preservation, archaeology, cultural resource management, architecture, and planning. The theme for the conference was Preservation, Education, Innovation. Information only.
Chair Treleski, members of the commission, I've just got a small report over the courses that I attended that I'd like to share with you, and then we do have Vice Chair Stagg and Chair Treleski that also attended, and they can give some of their insight. My notes include some of the notes from our recording secretary because she also attended. The first day I attended courses on, this is really kind of training for people that are on these commissions and staff members who work with people on these commissions. I think it'd be great next year to have someone from the commission go and they can also participate in that training. But the first course was on preparing a National Register nomination. That was kind of interesting. Any person can submit a nomination. Anyone, whether you own the property, you're a city, or you're a citizen, but the person that owns that property, they can veto the nomination if they want to try to not get it listed. Doesn't mean it wouldn't be, because the city historic preservation officer could still move forward with that after hearing. But people can nominate buildings, structures, objects, sites, and districts. There's various themes and points of integrity that they look at when you're making that nomination, so it's really got to have a relevance to the national history to be on the National List of Historic Places. There's various tools and pieces of information out there for people who are looking at doing that. All of the nominations have to go before the state review board for them to make a recommendation, and they meet 3 times a year. The next meeting is in July of this year. That's an all-volunteer board, but to go through that process, you need at least 135 days because there's time for SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, to make a review, and then also the owners and the city governments have to have time to respond. So 135 days allows for all of that, and then you may need additional time for feedback that comes from the review board. So it can be a bit of a lengthy process. We also attended another commissioner training where they talked about the 4 different principles of preserving historic properties, and whether that's preservation, keeping things as it is, rehabilitation, making a more compatible use, adaptive reuse of a space, restoration, trying to accurately depict the historic property as it was at a certain moment in time, or reconstruction, which would be recreating a lost resource. So there's different ways that you can go about trying to set up your historic properties or buildings or sites or districts. Also attended a session on the Arizona's role in America 250. I think a big part of that really was that those are going to be more localized efforts. There's not federal funding that's going to be involved with that. It's more on the state level and community level. And there are some resources available on the state commission website that you can look into. Also attended one on archaeology for local governments. Once again, they're seeing kind of the same thing. A lot of the funding federal-wise is being diverted, so more of those preservation efforts are coming down to the local levels. So you can do that by including historic preservation in your general planning, in ordinance development, and also coordinating with your stakeholders. The Federal Preservation Policy Roundtable, this was actually kind of a new workout session that was brought in. There was initially going to be a whole thing on neon signs, but they really wanted to go over where the state of funding is for state historic preservation offices. Those currently are not being renewed on the federal level. So our state historic preservation office may go away or may be drastically reduced in size. About 90% of the funding is federal. It is under the state parks department, and so the state could try to find funds to kind of stopgap, fill that in and keep that going. But they have some funding available still from the fiscal year 2024 for doing surveys and site, looking at our historic preservation stuff. So that is something that we're going to be looking at applying for. And I think Sylvia is going to touch base a little bit on that later on. But then there were some other resources that were talked about out there, including Local First Arizona, the Arizona Community Foundation. Those all have different grants and programs that you can apply for. And that's kind of the overall information that I got at the conference. I'd be happy to answer any questions with that.
I was curious about how much federal was coming, because obviously it's changing and changing fast. So the state could come up to it, but the state's got to come up with the money to do so.
Right, so the state, how the SHPO officer set up, the state's supposed to have a 40% match to the federal funding, which was just put into the budget monetarily up until the 2009 Great Recession, at which point they started using volunteer hours to make in-kind matches to the federal funding. So the actual dollars that are put on the state side's only about 1 in 10, and the rest is all federal funding, so at this time.
Josh, I know that the State Historical Preservation Group and SHPO and stuff are sending out emails requesting that we contact senators and others responsible for the budget. When you get those, can those be forwarded to us as commissioners?
We can be put on that list and forward those over, sure,
That
absolutely.
would be great. Thank you.
Could you speak a little bit about Flagstaff? And we had a discussion about their kind of organization of their historic properties.
So Flagstaff does have their own national, or Flagstaff list of historic places, as does Phoenix. And they have those kind of built into their ordinances and into their zoning, so that when something's put on that list, it's automatically zoned a certain way. One thing that we also learned in one of our sessions is that in 2006, Arizona had passed what they call Proposition 207, and it was essentially, if you take a piece of property and you change the zoning of that property and that reduces the value of that property, then whoever owns that property can sue the city for the lost value, including any legal fees that might be related to, getting that rectified. So that's something that Flagstaff and Phoenix, that they have to look for when they're trying to have a district be put on their list of historic places or list of historic districts, is does it change the zoning? Is the property owner going to be amenable to that, or can they get at least a certain percentage of the property owners so that it goes through without the city having that liability? And the city of Kingman actually has in our current codes a Kingman historic listing, and Sylvia's going to touch base a little bit on that in a future topic.
So that can be put on a future agenda? Or is she going to speak about it today?
Today.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add to what Josh was saying, that the biggest thing that was clear at this conference was that the role of local government, local resources, local historic preservation commissions is incredibly important right now, and there's an opportunity in here for each community to really take the forefront of how they want their history preserved and these different properties acknowledged. There'd been a lot of dependence on larger entities, and now's the time that, you know, we don't really have a choice, but it's a good thing for local communities to be able to take control of their own inventory and to make it important, show that it's important.
I don't have anything to add. Any other I guess no discussions, information only. The next report is the inventory of historic landmarks. Staff will review a current list of Kingman's historic properties and landmarks, information only.
Good afternoon. Josh and I are together on this project, or this item, actually. And so basically, we were asked about Kingman landmarks, historic landmarks. And so to start off, I mean, what's the difference between a historic landmark and a historic property? And honestly, Vice Chair Leah Stagg, you might know more than me at this point, but we'll give it a shot. But historic landmarks are more related to historic architecture, cultural, or archaeological significance. Historic properties relate more to the history of the area, and a property can be both. They can be both. And most of your landmarks are in the National Historic Register of Properties. So with that being said, we have some existing surveys that we reference, and one was done in 1979 called the Kingman Historic Property Survey, and then another in 1984 called the Kingman Historic Resource Survey. And that's the last time we had some done in this area, so they're very old, obviously. But basically, where we're at now, though, is that we'd like to get an updated survey. And that's what we're working on. Josh and I are applying for a grant within the next month with SHPO to hire a consultant to get initial survey established of, you know, since then, there's probably a lot more we need to add, right? And then we would bring that results to you and show you what we have, where we can determine from this list, you know, which ones do we want to designate or request to designate as historic landmarks and properties. There is a process in the zoning code, and at that point when we transition to that process, we are going to have probably Jason, the director, Jason Mokeen, or his staff member come and explain the process itself. But basically, once we have this survey completed, anybody from the Heritage Preservation Commission, a property owner or council can request designations, whether you want to establish a historic overlay district for certain areas of town or expand the existing one, or apply for certain buildings to be historic landmarks. That's where the process begins, and it then goes through the Planning and Zoning Department. It is brought before Heritage Preservation Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission and Council before there's something finally adopted, approved and adopted. Some brief examples I can give you that I looked up briefly was like the Red Schoolhouse. It's both an existing historic landmark and property. Whereas there's a couple homes, you may be more familiar than myself, like 525 Oak Street is Lefevre House. I don't even know how to say that correctly, but that is simply related to the historic of our area. And so we have a lot of these listed, and Josh put he has a list that I was referring to. But this is kind of what we've been looking at now. These are, is there maybe 2 in our historic overlay district? Because our district is so small, so most of them are outside of our district at this time. But circling back around, our next steps would to be logically finish the grant application project, get a survey completed, and then bring it back for you guys to review. Have any questions for me?
Is it possible to get a copy of that list, just for our reference?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could we have a copy of that?
The whole commission. We'll make sure you guys have a copy for sure. We'll get one emailed to you.
I'd like to drive around and see them.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. And a lot of times there's good information on some of the sheets that are provided with these listings that you may or may not know about.
Also, I noticed on the Kingman zoning code, it refers to a historic preservation officer. Who is that?
Currently, it is a member of the development services team. And it could be, I I'm not sure if it's exactly Sean Osterman or Jason Mokeen at this point, but it is in the Development Services Department.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. We'll bring that back to you when we get closer to that survey being done. Thanks.
The last of the reports, Kingman Past, Present, and Future documentary film for MCC's Flash Film Festival. Kingman's Office of Tourism will share the video that won first place in the documentary category at MCC's 5th Annual Flash Film Festival for Kingman Past, Present, and Future. The AI-powered film, led by Adam Geller using AI, brought historical photos to life to showcase the city's rich heritage. Information only.
I think you have to share it, Adam. Adam, you have to share it on Zoom?
Always the cycles of past and present reveal the future of that individual or society, which takes the effort to record and become cognizant of the historic voice of what is history, but a record of man's search for himself, only to realize in the end that death is but the beginning of another cycle. From the human cultures began the divergence that led to the development of the Mojaves and the Wallabies, who today inhabit the surrounding area. Men such as Sitgreaves, Cook, Ives, and Beale charted the area, giving their names to many of today's most famous landmarks. Beale gave his name to the springs, which were later to become the site of a military outpost and the beginning of what is today the city of Kingman. The development of the great mining industry began as exploration revealed the great mineral wealth hidden in the rugged and abounding mountains. In 1882, the railroad reaches the valley between the Surbat and the Wallaby Mountains, and the town of Kingman was born. Meanwhile, World War II gives the final blow to the mining industry. The thriving communities of Chloride, Mineral Park, and Cordova become ghost towns. In Mojave County, the story is one of fantastic growth, with population more than doubling since 1960. The old culture, as we've known it, has passed into oblivion, giving rise to our new generation. And while the technological level of development traversed by the new generation will be a far cry from that of the predecessors, they will, in effect, be only retracing steps in the patterns of growth as the seeds of life and death continue to expand. Both sides of history.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions or on it? So I actually have another video that no one's really seen this one. It's actually the kind of the outtakes from the AI, the bloopers. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to play this one. It's only another minute or so. But yeah, it's interesting to use AI in this type of purpose. You know, normally we're using AI to make our lives easier and simplify things, but in this case, we're using it to honor the past. And although, you know, it introduces some element of historical inaccuracy, it is kind of a tool to make it more interesting and lively, I think. So, you know, going forward, I think that with the introduction of new technology, there is potential for even more opportunities to use this type of thing to help to bring the past alive. So I'll go ahead and play the bloopers video.
The last thing, we have announcements by commission members, limited to announcements, board and commission liaison reports, availability, attendance at conferences and seminars.
I have a question on our first vote where we had the Route 66 question. Josh, does that go to city council now? Is that how that works?
No, I think that just kind of shows that this commission would be in favor of looking at the process.
I see.
There'll be other commissions that look at it, and then we've got to talk to other departments in the city and see what that looks like.
Okay.
There's a long process to it, so.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Also, I wanted to request that we invite Dr. Gretchen Dorner, Superintendent of Kingman Unified School District, to come be a speaker, talk to us about Palo Christi and the girls' gym at Lee Williams, and then they have the Pioneer Cemetery that was there also. So I think she would be a good person to come and talk to us about those historic sites in Kingman. So I'd like to ask that she be invited. And then also, Josh, there was a discussion on a brownfield project. I don't know that it was before us. I think it was at the tourism meeting or something, that brownfield project that they were going to be doing about coming and looking at historic buildings that needed renovation and asbestos issues and stuff. And I was wondering if there's a report showing if any of our local groups have asked that they be a part of that. I mean, I would see that as part of the historical.
So there was a Arizona Route 66 grant that was awarded funds. And it includes all the counties that Route 66 goes through. Terry Curtis, who is on our economic development team, was more involved in that, and we could ask that she come to the next meeting and talk about what that process looks like and how many local communities. I don't think it's out there yet for communities and property holders to apply for yet, but I think that will be coming soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, requests for future reports and updates.
I guess that was that. Got ahead.
Okay, meeting adjourned.